Hello and welcome back, adventurers. Today we're talking about the poor souls who call Falkovnia their home. But before we start, I want to warn you. Today I will be discussing state-sanctioned physical and sexual abuse, fascist regime, and slavery. I will not go into any details, but if you don't want to deal with it today, I totally understand. And if you're here to stay, let me tell you about the Falkovnian Populace. Humans are the sole group that has an opportunity to lead a dignified life in Falkovnia. Any other race is considered to be only good for hard manual slave labor. No matter their ethnicity, every Falkovnian has the hawk seal of Vlad Drakov branded on their forehead shortly after the birth. This brand identifies every Falkovnian as the property of Vlad Drakov. In addition to their brands, many Falkovnians sport scars and mutilations from punishment meted out by the soldiers, dispensing Falkovnia's brutal version of military justice. The vast majority of Falkovnians live in conditions of crushing poverty. From wheat fields to alleyways, commoners struggle daily to meet their most basic needs. Most Falkovnians work as serfs, cultivating the soil and harvesting crops on the land owned and managed by the military. Free families lucky enough to own land enjoy less backbreaking pace, but still forfeit to the government the majority of the crops produced. Craftsmen are forced to sell their goods through merchants authorized by military to conduct commerce. The military takes a substantial cut of crops and goods in addition to levying sales and civic taxes, tolls, fees and fines. Expensive bribes are often required for even trivial matters involving the military government. Given the brutal conditions of life in Falkovnia, many would expect the population to rise en masse against their oppressors. Generations of relentless abuse, however, have essentially crushed the will to rebel. Despite this, some few manage to summon up rebellious action and even become serious thorns in Vlad Drakov's side. In particular, the actions of the legendary knight Kontigal have harried Drakov's steps for years, thwarting his ambitions, undermining his military campaigns, and offering citizens of Falkovnia respite from Drakov's depredations. Recently, a group called themselves the Freemen of Falkovnia has provided mobile pockets of resistance throughout the realm. In addition, the humanoid rebels of the Spawn of the Lizard proved a persistent annoyance to Drakov, especially as Kontigal's shadow insurrection and the Spawn attempt to cooperate, coordinating their efforts. Falkovnia serves as breeding ground for a wide variety of diseases, and the populace suffers accordingly. Cholera from tainted water sources is common in Falkovnian cities. Outbreaks of bubonic plague seem to haunt the main cities each decade. Away from major settlements, hidden in the vast interior forests, Falkovnia also contains several leper colonies. Due to the ever-present possibility of death at the hands of Vlad Drakov's brutal regime, Falkovnians tend to marry young. Most marriages consist of a quiet celebration by families and close friends. To be recognized by the state, married couples must register with a ranking officer and pay a registration fee of 1 gold piece. The officer, issuing the registrations, or any superior officer may demand the right of the first night from a couple as a sign of fealty to Vlad Drakov. Drakov himself encourages and partakes in the rite. The Volcanion mentality manifests itself in two distinct manners. Most Falkovnians seek only to survive from day to day. The souls wear drab clothes, tend to their own business, avoid strangers, and do their best to avoid running afoul of the military. Citizens of this type who find themselves in the military generally find themselves in positions of low rank, taking little pleasure in the enforcement of the domain's sadistic code of law. Others actively seek to fit into the brutal system perpetuated by Vlad Drakov. These Falkovnians rise to prominence within the military, dominating their fellows and exercising their power to their advantage. Due to Drakov's desire for conquest, all Falkovnians are indoctrinated, so they hate and fear foreigners. Draconians in particular are considered Falkovnia's mortal enemies. For the Ministry of Arcane, the state rigidly controls arcane magic. Based in the Radiant Tower in Lekar, the Ministry watches Falkovnia citizens for sign of arcane aptitude. Those who follow the path are brought before the Ministry to swear oaths of loyalty to Vlad Drakov and the Kingdom of Falkovnia. The Ministry of Arcane may then call upon any Falkovnian arcane spellcaster to aid the Ministry's mages in their work. The Ministry of the Arcane is not well funded, so the number of Falkovnian magic users is low and their power limited. Undoubtedly a cause of Vlad Drakov's disdain for the magical arts. Falkovnia itself is a military state with the King-Pharaoh Vlad Drakov at its head. His every action serves only to strengthen the army's power. Given that the army is the realm's most prominent social institution, the commoners obey the soldiers of any rank as if they were gods. Drakov's whims are the highest law of the land, however, and mere shifts in his mood have been sufficient to condemn legions to death. Outside the army stands 5 ministries, military bureaucracies that address the needs of the state. The Ministry of Science conducts secret research at the cutting edge of science. Bolstered by technologies brought or stolen from realms far more advanced than Falkovnia, the ministry dedicates itself to enhancing the army's capabilities. This research allegedly involves everything from bizarre war machines engineered on shaky mechanical alchemical principles to living soldiers, enhanced to heal more quickly and fight more ferociously. The Ministry of the Arcane is Drakov's concession to the tactical advantages of magic. The Ministry of Finance and Trade oversees taxation and the financing of the realm's military exploits. Falkovnia's notorious trade colony program is the creation of this ministry, which first saw the imperial potential of merchant outposts secured with Falkovnian soldiers. The Ministry of Intelligence is a cagey bureaucracy that performs reconnaissance, sabotage, and counterintelligence for the realm's war machine. But the most notorious is the Ministry of the Central Prison, whose eponymous headquarters stand just south of Lekar. There, the truly damned of Falkovnia await their death. The Central Prison houses non-humans, gladiator fodder, political prisoners, and those unfortunate enough to be selected randomly for Drakov's evening entertainment. 3 limitations hinder Falkovnian army from reaching its full potential, all due to Blood Drakov prejudices. The Kingfisher keeps to very specific and antiquated beliefs regarding the art of war and cannot be persuaded to abandon them. He stubbornly refuses to acknowledge gunpowder and its enormous bearing on warfare, regarding it as a commoner's weapon. Drakov also holds a dim view of magic as a weapon on the battlefield, regarding it as the tool of book-learned cowards. He admonishes the Ministry of Arcane to focus their efforts on enchanting arms and armor, and tackling occasional special projects rather than training battle wizards. Finally, Drakov is an unflinching chauvinist, believing that the women are weak creatures, unfit for war. Due to that, female soldiers struggle twice as hard for promotions within the Falkovnian army as their male counterparts. The army requires Falkovnian commoners to carry identification papers with them at all times. These documents, stamped with seal of the Hawk and whispered to contain arcane protections against counterfeiting, are necessary for the most fundamental activities. Identification papers are an emblem of citizenship, indicating the bearer's whole life. The army puts foreigners entering and leaving the domain under harsh scrutiny, and are known to take high fees for issuing a traveling permit. Some border patrols even had a talent for turning up mysterious discrepancies in travel papers when Vlad Drakov's prisons grow bare. Punishments are harsh and often final in Falkovnia. Mitigating circumstances and clemency are alien concepts here. The high-ranking soldier that happens to be nearby when a law is broken acts as a judge and jury. Death, whether meted out in the streets or in prison, is the typical punishment for crimes of even moderate severity. Impalement on a long wooden or metal spikes represents the most common method of execution, if only because it is a personal favorite of Drakov's. The Kingfisher demands nightly execution to accompany the somber chamber music that plays during his dinner. Though often forgotten amid the horror of execution and maimings, slavery is also a common punishment. Prisoners are sold by the state directly to wealthy merchants or military officers. Owners can use and abuse their slaves in any manner they see fit, and many owners purchase slaves simply to exercise this right and satisfy their own cruelty. The government marks those prisoners who are physically strong or skilled for the realm's gladiatorial arenas. Life as a gladiator is extremely brutal, but successful warriors eventually earn better treatment than common prisoners, even gaining respect of their guards. During wartime, the army forces physically capable prisoners into service in sacrifice formations. The prisoners receive substandard weapons, or none at all, and find themselves consigned to the vanguard of suicide charges or human shield walls for officers. Thank you so much for your time, patient listeners. The more I research and tell you of Falkovnia, the more I realize that there is no end to human cruelty. So please, take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and be careful while crossing the mists.